morning and welcome to the May 18th, 2021 special meeting of the Glendale City Council being called to order at 9:04 a.m. And due to the evolving situation with COVID-19 and health recommendations from the LA County Health Department, the City Council special meeting will be available to the public electronically only. The meeting can be viewed on Charter Cable Channel 6 and AT&T UVerse Channel 99. Or you can stream online at glendaleca.gov in the public meeting portal. For public comments and questions during the meeting, call 818-937-8100. City staff will be submitting these questions and comments in real time to the appropriate person during the Glendale City Council special meeting. Thank you. And now may we have roll call, please?
Councilmember Agajanian.
Present.
Brotman.
Here.
Kasakian.
Here.
Najarian.
Here.
And Mayor Devine.
Here. And your report, please.
The agenda for the Tuesday, May 18th, 2021 special public meeting of the City Council was posted on May 12th, 2021 on the bulletin board outside City Hall.
Thank you. And next, Mr. Galanian.
Mayor, I'm going to read this into the record, and then I'll pass it along to the city manager. Finance regarding fiscal year 2021-2022 budget study session, 6 departmental study session, administrative services, finance, city manager, city treasurer, and Glendale Fire Department.
Hey, thank you, Mr. Galanian.
Yes, good morning, Madam Mayor, members of City Council. Excuse me. Thank you for spending your Tuesday morning with us. This will be our study session number 6. We have planned another engaging and informative session for you. Sadly, though, this will be the last departmental presentations for this fiscal year and the budget season. And to kick it off, I'm going to turn it over to Michelle Flynn, our Director of Finance, who have obviously been enormously engaged in the whole process with her staff. Michelle?
Great. Good morning, Mayor Devine, members of council. As we get the PowerPoint up, I will get started with our Department of Finance. So the official name of our department is Administrative Services Finance, but we like to just go by finance to keep things simple. Finance is a department that manages city's resources in a fiscally conservative manner. We are pretty much the gatekeeper for the public's money. We don't always win a popularity contest for that role, but it's the job that we're responsible for and we all take very seriously. Finance is a central support department, which means we provide support for all the departments in the city, as well as all the activities and operations that they perform in one way or another. The department is currently made up of 7 sections, and if council approves the action tonight for internal audit coming back over to finance, we will be made up of 8 sections effective July 1st of 2021. Accounting is our largest section. They handle all things accounting for 69 funds that we report on. I know we spend a lot of time talking about the general fund. Anytime we mention budget, that is just one of the 69 funds that we take care of for the city. They also are responsible for many journal entries, 1099 issuance to our vendors, all the vendor setups for anybody who's new that we need to make a payment for, all sorts of reconciliations that take place, as well as debt reporting. And I know I'm only naming a few of the activities that they handle. Accounts payable is pretty much very self-explanatory. They handle all payments that the city owes money to for all of our vendors, landlords, workers' compensation payments, etc. They run their check runs at least once a week, sometimes twice per week. Billing, collections, and grants. They handle all of our miscellaneous billings, for example, property claims that might recur as a result of a vehicle accident. They also handle our coordination with our city's collection company, and they manage that contract. They are the central point for all the grants that the city receives, and they coordinate with all the departments on all their documentation. And they handle all the record keeping for us regarding our large tax revenues, such as property tax, sales tax, UUT, et cetera, just to name a few. Budget, you are very familiar with as far as the annual budget process goes, as well as all the updates that we do year-long. But during the year, they're also responsible for a lot of coordination with departments in managing their budgets and in helping them throughout the year in any budgetary issues. We're also in budget responsible for reviewing all council agenda reports that come to you for any fiscal impact and making sure that those numbers are accurate and were reflected correctly. They do also coordinate the annual cost allocation plan, which is part of the annual budget process, and will be working on the upcoming fee study this next year. Our financial applications section is the section that keeps our ERP system going, which is our main financial HR payroll system for the city. They are responsible for all aspects that the application is designed for. They handle the workflow, maintenance, and setup of that. They also create many, many reports and maintain those for all of the users. They handle security, any troubleshooting, third-party system interfaces, and I know, again, I'm only naming a few things that they handle. They also, this past year, led a very successful system upgrade, along with coordination with ISD and HR, who are our main partners with the ERP system. Internal audit will likely be joining finance effective July 1, as I mentioned. They handle all the internal audits for the city. They coordinate with all the departments at the end of each fiscal year to put their audit plan together, which is considered their annual risk assessment. They perform continuous audits, which are more monitoring type audits, as well as their full-blown audits, and they coordinate and handle the audit committee, which meets 4 times per year. Payroll obviously processes and manages payments to all of our city workforce. Every 2 weeks, they're responsible for all the quarterly payroll tax reporting, PERS reporting, W-2 processing, and doing the annual reporting to Transparent California. And last but not least is our purchasing section, responsible for all citywide procurement needs. They coordinate heavily with all departments. They handle certain bids. They issue purchase orders, contracts, and maintain all of our P cards. So where we started in 2020, this is a photo where we were celebrating what we call our fiscal new year. Every July 1st for us is a new year. So we like to do a little celebrating and recognition every year on that day. We are a small department, but we do a lot of functions, and we're very close as a family at work. Everybody works really hard and definitely enjoys the celebrations that we could engage in. So how we have adapted. Obviously, like every other department, we had to adapt very quickly because of the nature of the work that we do, being in public service. And being a central support department, having other departments rely on us for a variety of tasks, as well as our employees relying on us for their paychecks, vendors for their payments, the council and the public relying on us for accurate and transparent reporting. We definitely needed to make sure that we could work remotely and adapt quickly to continue doing the work that we do. Fortunately, the nature of our jobs allowed us to be able to continue all that we did before the shutdown. We just did most of it from home. About 90% of the finance staff was able to go remote within about a week to a week and a half of the shutdown. All our managers and some staff already had remote access abilities, and we were able to quickly work with ISD to make sure the rest of our staff was granted access and obtain any equipment that they needed. And I have to say, I'm extremely proud of my entire team for how well each and every one of them adapted, basically kept doing what they do without really missing a beat at all. There wasn't one deadline that was missed. Managers were in constant and regular communication with their staff and with me, and we kept each other informed from all angles on anything and everything so that people could continue to feel connected and carry out their duties. So on top of our regular workload that I went through some of our tasks, COVID did present obviously some challenges just like every other department. And some of those challenges actually resulted in accomplishments that we're very proud of. The first was we were able to procure very high demand and hard to find commodities such as PPEs and remote work equipment. We also helped improve efficiencies for remote working by implementing digital signatures on contracts, as well as handling invoice entry in a paperless environment. We established COVID-19 related leave time for our city employees and tracking of that leave time for anyone who was affected. We were able to help our partners in CDD to set up recipients of housing and business recovery grant programs as payees to process their payments, and also embraced the new realm of virtual audits. With regards to PPEs and the remote equipment, these are just some numbers for the first 3 months of the pandemic to show you the impact of what had to happen. Obviously, more has been procured since, but in those first 3 months, we had to procure over 5,000 bottles of hand sanitizer, 32,000 face masks, almost 1,900 packages of disinfectant wipes, 675 bottles of antibacterial soap and disinfectants, 310 laptops, and 200 headsets. This was all to support all of our operations in the field, as well as anyone who is still coming into the office, and also on the remote equipment to be able to work from home. Most of these procurements were extremely difficult. As you can imagine, we were dealing personally with some issues of finding things for ourselves at home. These were also extremely difficult to find in the workplace. Everyone nationwide was competing for these items. There was high demand and a supply shortage, as well as supply chain issues, because if you recall, the pandemic started for us in March, but it had already happened in other countries a few months earlier, so our supply chain was heavily impacted. But I'm proud to say that with the lead of our purchasing section, led by our deputy director, as well as coordinating with all departments, we were able to successfully procure all these hard-to-find items. In the digital environment that we had to adapt to, we were fortunate to, right before the pandemic, we had council approval to implement digital signatures as a pilot program on contracts. So we were quickly able to adjust to that and roll it out very quickly. Since last March, we have digitally signed 408 contracts and legal documents. We've cut that processing downtime to an average of about 7 days, when previously we're estimating it was about 4+ weeks. And on the invoice side, we were still able to continue, but in a paperless environment, and enter over 28,000 invoices. Previously, each contract needed to have 3 original hard copies, and each of them had to have a wet signature. So as you can imagine, switching to a digital platform saves us in a lot of resources in printing and water, as well as trees and the environment. Accounts payable coordinated heavily with our billing and collections and grants section on opening mail and getting invoices scanned, so that the supervisor in accounts payable could basically automatically and remotely assign invoices for entry. So all of that was able to be done in a virtual environment. Support for our employees. We had a lot of regulatory compliance issues with regards to the federal leaves that were granted for employees. All of this needed to be tracked in a very specific way. Since March of last year through March of this year, we had over 33,000 hours for 571 employees that had some sort of COVID-related leave. In some of those cases, it was for childcare. In other cases, it was because people had to be quarantined for a potential exposure. And in other cases, because employees unfortunately had contracted COVID. Some of this leave can be applied to our ARPA funds if we so choose to. So we are looking at that closely to see if we can offset the costs. There's about $1 million or so just for the general fund. And as I mentioned, in coordination with our partners in CDD, we provided financial assistance for our rental assistance recipients as well as business assistance recipients. We cannot process any checks to any vendor, if you will, or any recipient without them being set up in our system. And there's certain documentation that's required in order for us to do that. So we were able to set up 380 rental assistance recipients as well as 447 business assistance recipients. And last but not least, internal audit was able to complete 15 virtual audits with the help of other departments coordinating with ISD, with iPads, as well as doing virtual interviews via WebEx and documenting audit evidence by taking screenshots, all while working remotely. A high-level view of our budget. This does include the internal audit section coming over. So for 21-22, we're looking at a total of $7.3 million in our budget, and the finance department is 100% in the general fund. Our staffing consists of 41.63 full-time equivalents. The increase that you see there in the full-time staff is the 4 full-time positions from internal audit. Otherwise, our position count would be flat. And as I mentioned, funding source is the general fund, and this increase, about $820,000 of the increase, is the result of audit coming over, and the other $40,000 is a combination of some salary increases offset by some decreases on our M&O side. So what's next for finance? We have quite a few endeavors coming up that will involve a lot of city resources, not just finance. We'll be involved in doing the citywide fee study. This will be the first time we're doing a fee study in many years. The last fee study that was done was in 2016, I believe, but it was not on a citywide basis. We're also obviously going to be very heavily involved in any COVID-19 federal assistance monies, all the grants that are out there that council has been seeing, as well as the ARPA funding. We are doing all the tracking, reporting, and accounting for all of that assistance. We'll be involved in the environmentally preferred purchasing program and working with the Sustainability Commission on setting some policies there. This is only the first year, but obviously that will be something that's going to be carried forward in the city of Glendale for quite some time. And last but not least, the pension support the pension committee support that we'll be involved in as that committee forms and goes through their objectives to report out to council. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Michelle. Very impressive. A lot of work being done. The purchasing of the PPE sounded like was a huge challenge. Are there questions or comments from my colleagues? And I can't see you, so you'll have to, unless there we go. Any comments or questions from my colleagues? Do we have any phone call?
I have a question.
Mayor, we have
Mr.
no phone calls.
Brotman? Thank you.
Yeah, Michelle, I was just on the environmentally preferred purchasing. What do you see as the long-term budgetary implications, both in terms of managing it and in terms of, well, I guess it's probably difficult to say what the increased cost might be. So maybe just in terms of managing it. I haven't heard, and I guess this is probably, I should be asking sustainability or management services for an update on where that project is, but if you could speak to your end of it, that'd be great.
Sure. Madam Mayor, members of council, Councilmember Brotman, Definitely, it is a little new, and as far as managing or any costs, we're still kind of feeling our way through and figuring out the best approach. My Deputy Director, Afshin Bokai, who oversees purchasing, is attending the commission meetings and working with David Jones out of Management Services on a regular basis. So they definitely have a good working relationship and will continue so as the policy is developed. And I guess as far as cost goes, it probably all depends on council's actions and the policy that is set for certain items and which items and how quickly those become part of the resources that we utilize.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Michelle, can you, I know that Councilmember Kasakian is always asking about the digital signatures. Do you think that you're going to continue that? Well, it wouldn't be a pilot project if you continue it, but moving into the future?
Oh, yes, Mayor Devine, we have found that it is much more efficient to be utilizing digital signatures. So we actually expanded it not just to contracts, procurement contracts, but during COVID, we expanded and added revenue contracts as well. We helped out legal on a few items that they needed a quick turnaround on with signatures, and workers' comp as well is utilizing it for their settlement agreements. So we definitely see the digital signatures becoming more of our daily business. Now, which platform we use, I think Mr. Bradford mentioned there may be another platform that can be used for certain internal forms or other types of documents. The platform that we're using is, there's an authentication process that happens because what the signatures are, they're all legal documents, obviously on contracts and settlement agreements. So that is that solution may not be the best for internal forms, but that's to be determined through the project that ISD is working on.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. If there are no other questions, then thank you, Michelle, for a very good report. Sure. And again, we're probably surprised or
yeah, Madam Mayor, I have just a question. I am concerned about the security and the validity aspects of the digital signatures. I don't want to bring up old laundry, but I don't know if what we had uncovered several years ago in one particular city department would have been more unnoticed if we were using the digital signature issue. I'm not naming names. I sound very vague and obtuse, and it's not my intention to do so, but the point is we have had issues with signatures before, and I just want to make sure that who's ever gearing this up, Jason or whoever in ISD, that if someone is going to sign a signature digitally, we can guarantee that it is that person and not someone in the office or a legal assistant who clicked the button to put the signature on it. So that's my only concerns from the legal and the security standpoint.
Mr. Bradford, do you have a comment?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Devine. Mayor Devine, members of the council, Councilmember Najarian. Your question is right on point, and when we evaluated this last year, we really put the platform through the paces as far as ensuring that very point that we can make sure we can authenticate who is actually signing these documents. We actually go through a fairly rigorous process. We use two-factor authentication for these documents that Ms. Flynn referred to. So we have an extremely high level of confidence in the signatures that are being returned to us and those that are signing the documents. In addition, the platform we use has an incredible amount of security baked into the process, because ultimately we need to ensure that the documents that are being returned to us are signed by the intended recipient. So that's hopefully that addresses the concerns. over the
Yeah.
digital signatures.
I mean, the last few digital signatures that I've put down look nothing like my signature. And if someone were to call me on it, I wouldn't be able to even confirm that that was I'm talking about, we're all using digital payment platforms. And, if I were to say this card was fraud and they were to say, well, here's your digital signature, I'm going to say, oh, Jesus, how it's much different than. So I'm going to leave that to you. I mean, I don't want to micromanage this issue. All I want to say is that please make sure that the security is top notch. That's all I want to say. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Is Councilmember Kasakian here? Does he want to make a comment on this?
Sure.
This topic?
Thank you, Mayor.
Great interest to him. Sure.
Hopefully everyone filed their taxes yesterday as a reminder, and while we're on the topic of finances, but I would only say and add to Councilmember Najarian's comments that in filing those taxes, which I did online, digitally, I did not have a wet signature or even a digital reproduction of whatever my actual signature is. It was done electronically with a verification of a California ID or a government-issued identification. So I think that there are ways to do it, and certainly if the federal government can take our money with that form, then we can find ways to provide services and get funds from our good residents and stakeholders. So I encourage staff to continue along the path of progress.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilmember. Okay. Thank you to Finance and Michelle Flynn and her staff. Great job. Next, Mr. Galanian.
Yes, Madam Mayor, Member City Council, next up is Management Services, or more familiarly known as the City Manager's Office. John Taktalian, Deputy City Manager, who manages our office's budget, will make the presentation.
Good morning, Mayor Devine, members of the City Council. So the Management Services Department is primarily responsible for working alongside all of our different departments here in the City of Glendale to manage the day-to-day operations of the city's tasks, but most importantly, it's to work alongside our City Council members to implement the policies and the direction provided by Council on a weekly basis during our Tuesday night meetings. We work in partnership with all of our departments, as well as our community members and partner agencies within the community, to make sure that we've heard what everybody has to say as we present those policy options to you and allow you to make those decisions, which we then move to implement. We really try to focus on maintaining a health and safety community with fiscal responsibility really at the forefront of our minds. And we do that again with great interest and partnership with our member agencies in the community. The City Manager's Office is primarily made up of some small sections, but that do some fairly large tasks. You have your city manager, who essentially we all report to, and then in terms of functions of our office, we have our community and communications and community relations section. That's primarily the agency or the division that deals with our public information, media relations, community relations, special events, and our various different special projects that occur within the city manager's office. We also have our graphics operation. They're located in the lower level of the Perkins Community Room. They are a high-functioning graphics, still graphics design and production studio. Most of the information that we put out in terms of our flyers, our brochures, our mailings, our publications, our public notifications are devised by a very small group of individuals that do very high-level professional work here in the city of Glendale for the unique type projects. Although they have, I should say, a fairly cutting-edge technology down there and a lot of skill, some of the unique projects where we don't have the capacities, they work alongside some private vendors that they have contracts with to develop and deliver those products to our various different departments. Our GTV6 operation is primarily responsible for the broadcast operations of the GTV6 programming. Again, a small group, but if you have ever watched any of the public service announcements or the motion graphics, the animation that's put together, all of that, every single piece of it is actually done in-house in our studio. They do have a fairly cutting-edge studio upstairs going through what is the final stage of an upgrade that was long overdue, probably 10 years overdue, utilizing PEG fees or PEG funds. So it wouldn't impact the general fund. And finally, our filming and special events operation, which is an area that we're currently looking at as we've thought about ways to reorganize our operation and outsource certain aspects of things that we do. So how did we start 2020? We were all very excited to take part in various different community accomplishments. Here's a photo of a number of elected officials and administrators sitting alongside a very successful service titan within our community. But that quickly changed in March, where our primary focus immediately turned to staying safe and keeping one another safe in the midst of the pandemic. The pandemic really dealt a little bit of an interesting blow to us. We had a very unique responsibility in working towards making sure our community was being effectively managed through this once-in-a-lifetime situation. And this was a situation where we didn't really have a rule book to try to figure out what the best solutions were moving forward. That's where we decided we needed to work closely with our partner agencies. I apologize, that's where we decided that we need to work alongside our partner agencies to figure out what the needs actually were within the community. In terms of community service efforts, we worked with our local hospitals very, very closely. In one instance, we realized there was a need to the technology need that they weren't able to fill. We had patients who were locked inside hospitals, unable to see family members, oftentimes at the end of life. That's where our community, our information services department was able to work alongside our elected officials, develop the contacts, and deliver some iPads to allow for that face-to-face interaction between the patients and their family members. We immediately, within the course of 2 days, realized the need to move to remote city operations citywide. While departments primarily dealt with their individual issues, their needs, their requirements to make that happen, we had to think about the policy implications and the policy direction being provided so that while we were going remote, we still had the means and the methods to provide the real-time, high-level service that this community needed. Now, more than ever, it was going to be critical that we did that well because the needs were so much higher. Throughout that whole effort, though, we didn't lose sight of our sustainability advancements. Throughout the year, we'll talk about some more. We did develop the Sustainability Office as well as the Sustainability Commission, and they've done a number of things over the course of the last 12 months to further those goals. And in the midst of a pandemic, as if that wasn't enough, this entire nation dealt with issues related to diversity, equity, inclusion, and racism, and the City Council didn't lose focus of those important issues, and we'll identify some of the things that we did in the next few slides in that regard. And finally, with respect to fiscal solvency, that's always been a mainstay, an area of focus for the City Manager's Office alongside the Finance Department and all the other departments in the organization. But this year more than ever, it was essential that we maintained that particular issue at the very forefront because there was so many unknowns about where we were headed, and what types of moves we needed to make proactively to ensure that we remained solvent and healthy as an organization. So just a little bit of a glimpse. I mean, these are what I just described in words are probably better described in numbers and statistics. From the very onset of the pandemic in March of 2020, we've developed over 2,500 splash pages, or at least we've updated, I should say, over 2,500 splash pages on the city's website. That was our means of delivering or keeping our community informed of the most recent changes. Oftentimes, it wasn't uncommon to have multiple changes coming in from various different regulatory agencies on a daily basis. All of that was really intercepted, interpreted through a joint partnership between the City Manager's Office and the City Attorney's Office. And we did our very best to make sure that that information was relayed to our community, not just through the website, but all the various different communication means we have available to us. In that process, or to that end, I should say, we developed 29 different COVID-related pages. These were specific websites or web pages that provided information to members of the community in their areas of interest and need. It could be anybody interested in rental assistance, down to businesses inquiring whether or not they were eligible for various programs that provided funding or PPEs. We worked very hard to maintain an updated COVID regulations page that had the most recent orders from the county interpreted and provided in multiple languages. We broadcast 212 meetings related to these matters. And this city council actually approved or adopted 30 motions, resolutions, and ordinances specific to COVID-related matters. 1,400 tweets is a lot of tweets. That number isn't our overall tweets citywide on Twitter. That was specific just to our efforts to communicate COVID-related matters with members of our community. Finally, we had about 70 different types of materials that we translated both into Armenian, Spanish, Korean, and Tagalog. I think the most impactful means of communication continues to be the one-on-one communication. And if you see on the bottom right-hand side of this particular slide, we developed very quickly the COVID-19 hotline. That was a hotline that we developed so that people could call a one-stop shop and ask any of the questions they had related to COVID. So needless to say, our employees had to become subject matter experts very, very quickly in state, federal, and local regulations. And oftentimes, they were really a sounding board for people who were just nervous and had questions. We tried to be as empathetic and patient and understanding and helpful as possible to help our community get through this. In terms of remote city operations, today is a great example of what we implemented very quickly. I'm very proud to say that alongside our ISD department that took care of all the technological issues, this city council never missed a single city council meeting, not a single one. We may have been off-site, but we never canceled one. In fact, we had a number of special meetings all remotely in a manner that allowed the community and members of the public to also participate. Something that wasn't necessarily the case for many months in other agencies that we're familiar with. All in all, this city council over the last year was presented 653 various different agenda items. The vast majority of them, 567 of them, were actually city council agenda items. And the rest, of course, had to do with the various different joint meetings that we have and the housing authority meetings that we have. One of the primary things that we talked about, and I want to reiterate, was our efforts to restructure and work remotely. Some of those policies, while they were put in place rather quickly, they actually were well thought out in terms of the alternate work schedules that we had put in place. And when it came time to bring employees back to the office, some of the initial steps that we took to develop those policies helped us to at least ease some of the concerns, the natural concerns that employees have of coming back to the workplace. And some of those alternative work schedules, the alternating schedules, have really helped us to ease back into it. And I'm proud to say that within the next 2 weeks, we're anticipating bringing back 100% of our staff in all areas of this organization, as long as we can continue to maintain that 6-foot separation and comply with all the other orders from Cal OSHA. Talked about sustainability advancements a little bit initially. While some of us were feverishly dealing with the pandemic, the work was continuing in the workplace in areas that may not have gotten as much attention, at least in the very beginning of the year. The Sustainability Office, under the leadership of David Jones, our Sustainability Officer, was established. This City Council also established our Sustainability Commission, which has held a number of meetings already. The Sustainability Commission worked alongside various different departments and the City Council to recommend different policy changes. The City Council implemented a ban on single-use plastics, ban on Mylar balloons, flavored tobacco, and also the Sustainability Commission worked alongside the Bloomberg Philanthropies to implement the food recovery program, which has recovered over 100,000 pounds of food and reduced carbon emissions by about almost 100,000 pounds. As I mentioned, as if one major issue wasn't enough, we dealt with a second major issue, not just us, but this entire nation. And this City Council took some very, very strong and direct positions on matters related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Specifically, there was no hesitation to look at Glendale, both past and present, and ultimately Council adopted the Sundown Town Resolution, as well as directed staff to work with a consultant a couple of weeks ago in developing a historic context statement that looks at the history of Glendale, the policies that were in place, both here in Glendale as well as, federally that impacted Glendale, and how that's impacted various different segments of society. More recently, the City Council took a position of solidarity with our Asian American Pacific Islander community members, and we've implemented a number of different implicit bias training opportunities, which we look forward to advancing, and I'll talk about some of those efforts in a couple of additional slides. And finally, fiscal solvency is an area that I stressed at the very beginning of this presentation. It's something that has always been important and really an initial thought anytime we're thinking about proposing a new program or a policy. We talk about what those fiscal impacts are. During the course of the last 12 months or so, we were obviously nervous. We were nervous along with all other regulatory or just the governmental agencies, because we weren't sure what the pandemic was going to result in terms of revenue loss. We worked extremely closely with our partner agencies through HDL and Beacon Economics to track what our sales tax and property tax numbers were doing. We worked closely with a company called Avenue Insights to track our revenues on the utility user tax side. We performed our own analysis on transient occupancy tax, or the hotel tax, by picking up the phone literally and contacting hotels to find out what was happening in the industry. And we worked closely with PARS, which is the agency that manages the city's 115 trust, the Section 115 trust. And the reason for that was the City Council made a very difficult decision several years ago based on the dollar amounts that were invested in that fund. And it was critical that we made sure that that fund was solvent, that it was safe, that the investment was not at risk. That we mitigated as much risk as we possibly could in order to also address, pension obligation issues that we know are looming both current and in the future. So in terms of the budget, Management Services has about a $6.1 million budget. That number is we'll get into the details of that in the next slide, but that number, it has slightly increased over the last year based on the fact that if Council approves moving the Performance and Innovation Office to the CM's office, it's going to have an impact both on salaries as well as full-time employee counts. Now recognize that also means that there's a reduction somewhere else within the general fund, so the net increase is a wash within our fund. But if you'll notice on this particular slide, we started the year in 2020-21 with 22 full-time employees, and now we're proposing 23 full-time employees with innovation and performance moving over. That what that number fails to illustrate is that over the course of last year, we worked really hard to restructure, reorganize our office to make it run more efficiently as well as effectively, quite frankly. And that was done through the elimination of one full-time position, as well as the lateral transfer of one full-time position to another department here in the organization that needed the additional assistance in their operations. The 3 additional positions, however, that we're picking up are 2 from Innovation and Performance, as well as the one that was proposed to help Mr. Jones in the area of sustainability in the Sustainability Office. So all in all, our net increase based on all of those changes in sum is the addition of 1 full-time employee position. This is a closer look at our general fund, I should say our entire budget. Again, the vast majority of it is in the general fund. And with all the changes I just described, the net increase is only $132,000 or roughly $133,000. Absent all the changes that we had made to run more efficiently, that number would have been significantly larger today. And the Cable Access Fund, you'll notice, is a fund that is used for upgrades to GTV6, council chambers, and any of the capital needs that we have to broadcast our various different board and commission meetings, council meetings. And the reason we don't have anything proposed for next year is because the $103,000 was the completion of a small project we had from the previous year. These are the same slides in the same level of detail. So what's next for the Management Services Department? As we continue to work on areas that this City Council has identified as priorities for this community, we're going to continue working with community development as well as our private contract agencies to seek and develop more affordable housing within our community. The issue of sustainability continues to be at the forefront of our minds, and we're really at the beginning stages of all of that with a lot of work already done, but clearly with the work plan that Mr. Jones has, there's a lot of work yet to be had. So that's going to be a main area of focus for the City Manager's Office over the next year. We look forward to working with our partners with the Armenian American Museum, who are set to break ground on July 1st. For the first phase, July 11th for the first phase of that project. And we're excited to work with our finance department as well as our members of our community in the newly formed or forming, we're still in the process, the forming Blue Ribbon Pension Committee. I believe our date for applications closed yesterday. And I know that we've received a number of applications thus far, which we'll provide to council and come back for the appointments to occur. We've already identified a facilitator who would manage that operation or help us manage that operation, I should say. We anticipate coming back in the next few weeks for that so that we can get the work started. We're still on track to get that completed by the end of the calendar year and a report provided to council by then. We're going to continue working on areas of identifying open space to further our green zones within the city of Glendale. And we look forward to the next phase of both the pedestrian plan and the bus rapid transit program or plan. And finally, in the area of no hate or inclusion diversity, we continue to work on programming that we can implement throughout this organization to further educate our employees, as well as members of our community where we can, on areas of diversity, inclusion, equity, equality, bias, stereotypes, cultural humility, and finally, best practices. And some of the ways that we are looking at accomplishing that through the training programs is looking at opportunities to expose our employees to implicit versus explicit bias concepts, focusing on areas of diversity, that we haven't necessarily thought of. It just doesn't come naturally to us because we haven't been exposed to a certain way of thinking or a different way of thinking. The concept of intent versus impact, I think, is another area that's somewhat new to me. It makes sense when you think about it and learn about it, but it's not something that we think of in natural terms. And then finally, the issue of calling in versus calling out. All new concepts to many people, but I think ones that we absolutely need to focus on as we work to change the way that we've done business for many years in this country, quite frankly. With that, that concludes management services or the city manager's presentation. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to try to address them.
Mayor,
Thank you.
Mayor,
Yes?
Mayor, I do have a caller on the line.
Okay, let's hear from the caller while we're getting our council on board here.
David Eisenberg, you're live. David, you have 3 minutes. Go ahead.
Good morning, everybody. I'd like to thank you for all your, your great work on from management services. This is very impressive, and I really enjoy what you've done, what you have up next in the management services. I'd like to talk about and commend you for the meetings that you've broadcasted, 212 meetings. And I found that this is such a nice platform for some of the meetings I never would have attended if it hadn't been for they were live streamed and there was participation by phone call. And this is a great step. What I'd like to ask, if you have anything planned for the broadcast right now is in VHS format. It's very low resolution, and commonly things are broadcast in 1080p or even 2K. Are there any plans for upgrading that? It would make the slides easier to read on the television. This would be an upgrade to the GTV feed and an upgrade to the web services. And I'm sure there's a budgetary amount in there. And I don't know if you've looked at that and if that's possible for City Council to look at that kind of budget. So thank you for all your great work. Goodbye.
Thank you, Mr. Eisenberg. John?
Mayor Devine, members of the City Council, that's a great question, and one I wish that we would want the same thing. I will say that, especially with the most recent upgrade to the technology side of our business in GTV6, we are fully capable, and not capable, but we actually do record and broadcast in high definition. Unfortunately, what ends up happening is, while you can get the high definition feed on YouTube, AT&T and Spectrum end up downgrading that signal because we're not treated the way that a typical Channel 7, Channel 9, Channel 11 would be. Government access channels in all agencies, in all different cities, are broadcast in standard definition, and it's one that saves the provider money because it reduces the amount of bandwidth that they're required to broadcast the service. So while we have the capability and we deliver a high definition signal, by the time it gets to them, they actually downgrade it so that they can save space on their network. And it's not one that they're willing to negotiate on. We have tried.
Thank you. Do any of my colleagues have comments or questions for Mr. Taptalian? Okay, in that case, I just want to say...
Madam Mayor, sorry. I have a barking dog in the background, and I was trying to wait till she quieted down. Just one clarification and one question. John, so you say your budget does include that extra headcount for David Jones in sustainability, is that right?
Yes, Councilmember Brotman, I did check that this morning with our finance department just to double check, triple check at this point, and that one position that the City Council did not want funded out of Measure S funds is being proposed to be funded out of the general fund.
Okay, perfect. And then the other question has to do with, back to our Sundown Town resolution. We joined this group at the time called the Government Alliance on Race and Equity. And what we said in the resolution, and we also said in the staff report and discussed that that would give us access to resources, and we would use that to develop an action plan. Those were the words, an action plan for consideration and discussion by City Council. I'm wondering when when that's expected to happen. I know we had a maternity leave situation that might have impacted that, but I think we'd all like to see that come back.
Councilmember Brotman, yes, that is definitely not an area that we have lost track of. Although we had the employee who was working on this primarily go on maternity leave, the effort did not stop there. We continue to work with GARE, the agency you just referenced, to put together a number of different training programs internally for our staff. Programs that the City Council, in fact, went through themselves with respect to implicit bias training. I know the employee you're referring to, Christine Powers, has been working with them, and I believe we will be returning within the next 2 months, with what you just described.
Okay, thank you very much.
Anyone else? I just want to say that your ability to collaborate and your focus on collaboration in this department has proven very valuable during this past year with the COVID. I want to give, first of all, to GTV6. They do a fabulous job. They do a terrific job. And I also want to compliment, is Dean Lopez the staff manager for the graphic department? Well, I want to give him kudos because and I'm assuming that his department did all of these graphics for the presentations for these 6 sessions. Am I correct?
Madam Mayor, Member City Council, actually it was a collaborative effort, like you mentioned, with the departments. Primarily, it was the departments and their budget liaisons and our budget team that put them together. But moving forward, Dean and Elena Bolbolian and her staff have come up with a format, a template that we'll use, that will incorporate the presentations that you've seen. Make it more standard.
They've been very interesting and fun and have added to the to all of these sessions. So thank you to the and I'm looking forward to, and I think council is as well, to in anticipation with the programs and the projects and that you're planning for the next year. Thank you very much. Mr. Galanian, what's next?
Yes, Madam Mayor, Member City Council. Next up is Rafi Manukian, City Treasurer, more affectionately known as Mr. Moneybags, who manages our funds and does a great job of it. He's going to present the City Treasurer's budget.
Thank you, Mr. Galanian. Madam Mayor and council members, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. As soon as I figure out how to work this, very good. I am here presenting our budget today. Our office is responsible for managing the city's investments, banking activities with the goal of safeguarding the public funds and maintaining liquidity and optimizing returns. Our office is mainly composed of 3 different functions. The main function is the banking function, and then investments and trustee responsibilities. We don't have any bonds at this point, and so therefore there are no trustee responsibilities, so it's just banking and investment at this point. A couple of years ago, during our office renovations, we were fortunate enough for the City Council to provide us funding to install the safety glass, the security glass that you see, which came in very handy during the pandemic and before the pandemic. The way we operated, as departments had, they completed their paperwork, they brought it into the office, and at any point in time they could come in and present their paperwork. During the pandemic, we changed that procedure, and everyone started scheduling appointments. Some of our staff started working from home, telecommuting, engaging through different, various different technology platforms. Some of the most pressing challenges that face our office this year is the banking function. As you know, we have a certain amount of time to respond to issues that deal with fraud, and that was a task that was pressing for our office. The city's investment portfolio, as I said, continued vigilance against fraudulent activities, and PCI DSS compliance. Some of our KPIs, investment earnings for the first 3 quarters were about almost over $9.7 million. That's for 3 quarters, from July 2020 to March 2021. On a quarterly basis, we reconcile in excess of 12,000 transactions, electronic wires and all of that, 13 to 1,400 per quarter, and records requests handled anywhere from 10 to 20. During the first 3 quarters, there were no fraud activities that went through our banking systems, our banks, our accounts, number of checks that we transmitted, scanned and transmitted over 6,000 a quarter. That's about approximately 2,000 a month. Moving on to our ongoing activities that we perform for our annual compliance, we took inventory and reviewed departments' payment card processing, related systems, applications, and documents, coordinated with departments on training. We helped employees meet their training requirements for PCI compliance. And we go through a PCI audit on an annual basis, and this year we received our approval on December 23, 2020. I would be remiss if I did not mention the internal audit and information services department, who collaborate with us to get these validations, and we do appreciate their help throughout the year. Overview of our very large budget, approximately $972,000. I think I'm the only department that has a budget in the thousands, not in the millions. So $972,000. The number of personnel authorized and position count is still approximately 5.8. It's basically 5 employees with a part-time hourly employee. Our funding sources, they're all through general fund. We have an increase of $31,000. Most of it is in PERS costs, $15,000 in PERS costs, insurance costs, and step increases. And I think I purchased 2 extra paper clips this year. Ongoing, what's next for our office? First and foremost is
Staples. Staples are cheaper, Rafi.
Okay, next time. I will switch it to Staples. The foremost concern for me, for my office, is the safety and security of our workforce, our staff. That comes first, above everything, of course. We want our staff to work in a safe environment and where they feel comfortable coming into the office as we start transitioning into more or less a full-time office operation. We will continue managing the bank accounts and continue being vigilant as it relates to fraud. And as I said, we go through a PCI audit on an annual basis, and we will continue doing that with the help of internal audit and information services. That is my presentation. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you. Thank you, Rafi. Any questions? Mr. Manukian?
I do.
Do we have any? Mr. Brotman?
Yes, Rafi, hi.
Hi.
One thing I don't see on the what's next is anything about the ESG investing, environmental, social, and governance investing. I know we've talked about it, and I think you're bringing something to us in the not too distant future. Are you?
Yes, as we prepare for the annual review of the investment policy, I will be including that into the presentation of the investment policy. And as I said prior, we are, because I am doing the one who's investing, I am abiding by those standards currently. So we will be bringing the policy to you, and we are following those guidelines currently.
Okay, and you'll be recommending or giving us options for changing those guidelines to reflect more of an ESG
Yes, yes,
focus.
yes. That will be coming with the overall policy. That will be part of it. Yes.
Okay, and then the other question is I noticed that our weighted average portfolio has moved out from 13 to 16 months or so. Is there an intentional policy to extend maturities, or is that
No.
just
No,
for some other-
generally our portfolio has a 2-year weighted average lifespan, and it had decreased over the past year because as some of the investments matured, we did not reinvest them because we needed, during the pandemic, we need to accumulate some funds in case there was an urgent need for liquid cash. And now we're starting to reinvest again, going out to generally 5 years. So the weighted average is going back to approximately 2 years probably by the time we're done reinvesting all the funds.
Oh, so we're consciously moving it out now. We had pulled it back, you're saying, because of COVID.
We did not intentionally pull it back, but as investments started maturing, then the weighted average lifespan of the investment got shorter. But now because we had more liquid cash, basically.
Okay. Thanks a lot.
Okay. Any other questions?
Any other questions? Any callers? None?
There are no callers, Mayor.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Rafi.
Thank you.
Good job, and keep the money rolling, will you?
Absolutely.
That is,
Thank you.
rolling in. Okay. All right, what's next, Mr. Galanian?
Yes, Madam Mayor, Member City Council, the final department to make a presentation as a part of our budget study sessions is our Glendale Fire Department that, as you know, has a tremendous impact on the health and quality of life and safety of our community. I'm going to turn it over to Chief Lanzas for his presentation of the budget.
Thank you, Mr. Galanian. Good morning, Madam Mayor, members of council. Silvio Lanzas, your fire chief. I'm humbly honored to be before you this morning to present our fiscal year 21-22 budget. If I may, before I get into the presentation, I would like to introduce and thank a few individuals who have not only helped me to prepare this year's budget, they have helped me to lead, guide, and support this organization through one of the most challenging years in our history. Please allow me to introduce our command staff, several who are here with me today. Starting with Anita Shandy, our Deputy Director of Fire Administration, Battalion Chief Todd Tucker from our EMS section, Battalion Chief and Fire Marshal Jeff Ragusa from our Fire Prevention section, Battalion Chief Phil Ambrose from our Verdugo Fire Communications section, Battalion Chief Ed Foster from our Training section, and our 3 platoon battalion chiefs, unfortunately, are unable to be here with me today. Chris Stavros, our A Platoon Battalion Chief, B Platoon Battalion Chief Brian Julian, and C Platoon Battalion Chief Brian Ritchie. Last but certainly not least, I would like to thank our public safety business specialist, better known as our budget guru, Gor Galstian. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for all you do. The mission of the Glendale Fire Department is to protect life and property by providing the highest level of service to the community. We strive to be recognized as leaders in our profession who demonstrate excellence in the service delivery through our actions. Our mission is something that we take very seriously. In our profession, it is not always the perfect set of circumstances that we face. No 2 fires, no 2 accidents, no 2 911 callers are ever the same. For this reason, we empower our leaders and our scene commanders to be guided by a mission-driven culture. We also recognize that by being a Class 1 organization, we are leaders in our profession, and with that comes the responsibility to always, not sometimes, not only when we are rested, not only when we feel perfectly, but always carrying out our mission to the best of our abilities. We owe this to the people we serve. We have worked very hard to continue to improve upon our response times and continue to be leaders in this area. We have focused on our turnout times, how quickly we process our 911 calls, and how quickly our firefighters don their safety gear and get on the road to the scene of an emergency. We do this very, very well. Even with the addition of having to don additional personal protective equipment before we responded to sick patients this year, we continue to trend downward in our turnout times. And the area where we are the very best at, and in my opinion, the most critical to saving the most lives and how quickly we jump on our fires and contain them. Last year, we responded to over 800 fires, and I can only think of a few that grew past the growth stage and became large incidents. I strongly believe that the single action on the fire ground that saves the most lives is a well-placed and well-staffed hose line. We do this in this city better than anyone else, and I'm extremely proud of that. In fact, this morning, about 4:30 this morning, we responded to a vehicle fire on Howard Street that was threatening a building. Our firefighters quickly contained that fire and kept it to only minimal damage to a close garage. Our department is composed of 7 main sections: our Verdugo Fire Communications Center, our Fire Prevention Bureau, our Fire Administration Section, our largest section, the Operations Section, our Training Section, and our Emergency Medical Services Section. Last, our Emergency Management Section. We started the year with a buzz of high energy and excitement. Thanks to the support of this council and our Fire Foundation, we were one of the first fire departments to outfit every on-duty firefighter with a thermal imaging camera. The picture in the top right is of the press event announcing this added public safety benefit. Shortly thereafter, on January 16th, we held our promotional ceremony, seen on the bottom 2 pictures, where clearly we had a packed house and had no idea what social distancing even meant. We celebrated the graduation of 10 new firefighter-paramedic recruits and several promotions that morning. Later that day, January 16th, we would utilize that very same thermal imaging technology that each of you helped to put in the hands of our firefighters to help locate and rescue 2 of our own firefighters who fell into a well-involved basement fire after rescuing 5 civilians from an upper-story apartment. The picture in the top left is of that scene. This was the start, and only the start, to a year that we will never forget. We ended the year completely different than how we started. Our personnel weathered the spike of COVID-19 into the new year. Our responders saw a 40% increase in the number of incidents where a patient was pulseless and not breathing, thus requiring advanced support treatment. These are difficult and emotional calls that our organization responded to 40% more than they had the years prior. Throughout the year, and due to the COVID-19 pandemic and all the requirements and challenges it posed, we spent the year focusing on our fundamental core duties: saving lives and keeping our community safe. Although challenged, we were still able to accomplish many of the year's goals. Some of them I will highlight here. We continued to recruit, hire, and promote the very best employees while aiming to improve upon our diversity numbers. We implemented a new computer-aided dispatch system in our Verdugo Fire Communications Center. We were absolutely trendsetters and leaders amongst the fire service in coming up with innovative ways to stay engaged with our community. And of course, as I will further highlight in the presentation, we never slowed on the delivery of our world Class 1 service. In keeping with our Safe and Healthy initiative, we continued to recruit and hire new members throughout the organization. Last year, despite the difficulties of having interviews in person and having any kind of physical activities in close quarters, we managed, with the support of our friends in HR, to complete and execute a full 16-week firefighter-paramedic recruit academy. We did so without a single COVID-19 exposure or positive case. And in 2020, we hired 33 new employees into the organization. Since 2019, we have been successful in our goal of continuing to find the very best talent while improving our diversity. We've had the good fortune of increasing our Armenian firefighters by 37%, and we have had a 15% increase in women within the department. With the implementation of our new computer-aided dispatch system, we completed a critical infrastructure project that was 5 years in the making. This new state-of-the-art CAD allows our dispatchers to utilize real-time GPS to send the closest units to the scene of an emergency and also allows us to expand on our dispatch capabilities by giving us the ability to implement tiered dispatching. This critical service we provide to the 13 agencies we serve and nearly 1 million people served each day by Verdugo. In 2020, Verdugo Fire Communications personnel dispatched over 75,000 emergency incidents. They answered 170,000 phone calls and answered those calls 99.59, let me say that again, 99.59% of the time within 15 seconds. As you're all well aware, our dispatchers, like our responders, are not able to work remotely. These dedicated professionals continue to come to work each and every day. And just last week, one of our new dispatchers, Wendy Roy, provided telephone CPR to the parents of an adult male who was found pulseless and not breathing in his bathroom. Later that day, the mother of the patient called to personally thank Wendy for saving her son's life. He's expected to be okay. This is only one of the 170,000 calls our dispatchers take every year. We continued throughout the year to find innovative and creative ways to remain engaged with our community. As you are all well aware, our employees volunteered early on in the pandemic to deliver groceries to our senior community when the guidance strongly encouraged them to stay indoors. This and our continued vaccination efforts across our community, including once again being one of the first fire departments to deliver home vaccines, gained much local and national media attention. Throughout the year, we did a lot to stay engaged with our community. I will highlight some of those things now. We provided custom birthday messages and drive-by birthdays for kids in our community. We continued to deliver our junior fire program virtually to 2,000 Glendale students. Despite it being a different than usual ceremony, we held our awards ceremony recognizing the outstanding actions of our employees. We held a virtual promotional ceremony where we welcomed our newest members and celebrated our promoting ones. We shared the after-action review of the car fire, which I highlighted in one of the earlier slides, where our firefighters became trapped in the basement. It has been viewed throughout the fire service world over 35,000 times. We supported our hospital with a salute to healthcare workers at each of our 3 hospitals. We partnered with our friends in economic development in being safety ambassadors and walking our business community and helped to deliver masks and hand sanitizers throughout the city. We again participated in the Spark of Love program, where we were able to provide 1,500 toys to Glendale children. Our Firefighters Association sponsored 15 local families, which included 37 kids with a holiday meal, gift cards, and toys. And we have helped to vaccinate thousands of people throughout the numerous vaccination clinics across our city, and we continue to support the Jewel City Vax Clinic each day. And of course, one of the areas I'm most proud of is the resiliency of our people and our continued Class 1 service delivery. As firefighters, we are naturally driven and find personal and professional satisfaction in helping people and bringing calmness out of chaos. In 2020, we did that a lot. We responded to almost 19,000 emergency incidents. Our average response time to an EMS call was 4 minutes and 49 seconds. Our average response time to fire calls was 5 minutes and 28 seconds. And 2020 was not only the year of the pandemic. 2020 was also the worst and most destructive fire season in our state's history. Our firefighters spent over 1,300 personnel days on fires across the state. We had firefighters on all major fires, from Butte County, Santa Clara County, Santa Cruz County, to as close as the Bobcat Fire just east of us. Our fire prevention section also never skipped a beat throughout the pandemic year. We completed 100% of our state-mandated inspections, as well as 100% of our brush inspections in the high fire severity zone. Our Plan Check new construction division served over 1,600 customers, completed 772 Plan Check submittals, and conducted 980 new construction inspections. Bless you. They also issued 161 film permits and 45 special event permits. And our environmental section diverted 220,000 pounds of hazardous waste from our landfills through our hazardous waste program. So here's our budget. The proposed 21-22 budget, and what you see is a budget of $74.7 million. This is a zero ask budget. We are not asking for any additional positions or any additional monies. 62.6 million is in salaries and benefits, with about 12 million in maintenance and operations. And we have a $150,000 capital outlay project for our Verdugo Fire Communications Center. Our personnel count, as you heard last week with Mr. Bradford's presentation, we gave up a vacant position in our Verdugo Fire Communications Center to support ISD and the citywide effort and the need for increased cybersecurity. So our full-time headcount was reduced by 1. The large majority of our FTEs, our hourly FTEs, are our ambulance operators. Our total FTE count is 251.60 positions. This slide depicts the summary of our budget and how it breaks out. As you see, the largest funding source is our general fund, followed by the Fire Communications Fund or the Verdugo Fund, and our hazardous disposal fund is next. The mutual aid fund is 100% reimbursed, and actually we make 10%, a 10% administrative fee on our responses to mutual aid, and I'll talk about that in the next slide. Next, I would like to talk briefly about our overtime and how it breaks out. The image on the screen shows the breakdown of our year-to-date overtime expenditures through April 2021. The overwhelming majority of our overtime cost is for constant staffing. Allow me to explain. Each day, we have 50 firefighters on duty who staff our 9 paramedic engines and 3 ladder trucks. We also have 6 ambulances staffed with 2 EMTs each on duty each day. Anytime a firefighter or EMT takes a day off or is sick or injured and unable to come to work, I pay another firefighter or EMT overtime to maintain our constant staffing. This year, 74% of our overtime cost is for constant staffing. 23% is for our mutual aid, which is when we go outside the city to assist another agency with a brush fire. And as I previously mentioned, we are fully reimbursed for every dollar spent on mutual aid, and in fact make 10% above what we spend. The current fiscal year, and because of our strong commitment to the mutual aid and the fires that I spoke about earlier, we will receive $2.5 million in mutual aid reimbursement this year. The other sections, as you see, the true overtime categories, as I like to call them, are very, very minimal. So what's next for us, the GFD? We have a lot of exciting things already happening, which we will carry throughout this year and into next. Yesterday, 6 of our ambulance operators who are promoting to firefighter paramedics started a pre-academy. For the next 3 weeks, we'll work hard to earn a spot in our full-time promoting academy of firefighter paramedic recruits. We are working on the final details, but in early June, we will be bringing goats to our city to help with the brush abatement program. We're planning 2 community events in early June to allow the community to come see the goats before they go to work. We are in the planning phase for bringing back in-person CERT training. We are aiming for September for our first in-person CERT class. We have already been engaged with our local HOAs and community groups on this effort. We are also planning a community brush clearance day in the coming weeks to help bring attention to the importance of brush clearance in our community. We are working with several captains within our organization to bring back a Fire Explorer program to further enhance our path for attracting local talent into our department. We are starting the process for obtaining the Center for Public Safety Excellence accreditation. We will be working on the replacement of our end-of-life self-contained breathing apparatuses. We will continue to be fully dedicated to vaccination efforts and any effort which helps to keep our community safe and healthy. And we will be working with our partners in Public Works on the seismic and functional upgrades of 2 of our fire stations this year, and I hope to bring a plan to this council next year on a multi-year plan to upgrade the remaining 7. And last but certainly not least, we will continue to meet the needs of our community and will continue to enhance on our Class 1 service delivery model. This concludes my presentation. I would like to once again thank each and every member of the Glendale Fire Department for their outstanding and tireless work in service to our community. I would like to thank you, Madam Mayor and City Council, for your continued support of our department and your commitment to helping us carry out our mission each day. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Chief. of course, we, your response to COVID this year was exemplary and extraordinary, and we all thank you for that. And so, you've given us a lot of reasons why you are a Class 1 organization. Do my colleagues have any questions? Mr. Brotman?
Yes. I didn't even raise my hand. You knew I was going to have a question, right?
Psychic.
Yes, Chief Lanzis, I had a question about funding for fire apparatus, because I know that we have $1.5 million in the Measure S budget for, I forget if that's for an engine, a ladder truck, or some ambulances, but is that the plan going forward, that we're going to be funding our fleet replacements through Measure S? Why are we doing it that way this year if that's not the long-term plan? Because I don't remember seeing that in last year's Measure S budget.
Yes, Madam Mayor, members of council, Councilmember Brotman, you are correct. We have submitted this year out of Measure S $1.5 million for the replacement of a ladder truck. The reason for this need is in 2005, the chief at the time had the good fortune, honestly, to buy 6 pieces of equipment that year. Our apparatus, we utilize 10 years frontline, 10 years reserve, so they're a 20-year lifespan on the apparatus that we use in our city. As you can imagine, the purchase of 6 large apparatus in 2025 would be a large purchase, likely in the $8 to $9 million range. So with the availability of Measure S and my plan to purchase 1 piece of apparatus each year, 1 large piece of apparatus each year, I have submitted that request through Measure S to help maintain our fleet's status, maintain the ability to respond to emergencies throughout our city, and to not burden any budget, the Measure S or general fund budget, with a purchase in 2025 for replacement of 6 apparatus. So I'm trying to maintain a balanced $1.5 million each year would allow me to keep my entire fleet within that 20-year life cycle.
Okay, so we should expect to see each year, that's the plan. Each year you would like to request funds to replace one vehicle.
Yes, sir.
Madam Mayor, Member City Council, Councilmember Brotman, if I may add to Chief Lanzas's response or comment, we will, as you noted, or as the Chief noted, will continue to request funds out of Measure S for the purchase of these ladder trucks on an annual basis until such time, in my opinion, that the general fund will be healthy enough to absorb that cost.
Okay. And just the other thing on the goats, and thank you for that. And I think I know there are a bunch of people in my neighborhood that are very excited about it. For marketing purposes, I love the term bleat and greet for the event. So it'd be great if we could call it a bleat and greet. That's definitely not my idea. That came from somebody else. But when do we think that's going to happen? You might have said it and I missed that.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, members of council, Councilmember Brotman, we will certainly, that's the first time I've heard that, bleat and greet. That's funny. We will certainly keep that in mind for a marketing push for the community to come visit the goats. We are aiming for, the goats are currently deployed in neighboring cities. So as soon as they finish there, we hope to have them here the first week of June. We are aiming for somewhere around June 8th for a community engagement day where they will be able to come out and see the goats before we release them to get to work.
Okay. I thought I emailed you the bleat and greet. Maybe that was somebody else. But I just love that so much, I had to say it. Thanks a lot.
Mayor?
Any other comments, questions?
Yes. Mayor, if I may.
Councilmember Casati, go ahead.
Thank you, Chief Lanzas, for your presentation. I know that you have a lot to be proud of with your staff working extra hard during this pandemic, and you having taken the helm of coordinating many of the efforts to address this pandemic and this virus. I particularly am grateful for the efforts that the fire department has done to increase diversity among its ranks. I think that a healthy city is one where the organization and the bodies that serve the public reflect the community that we serve. So in that regard, I want to commend you for succeeding where not all of your predecessors, I know it started with Chief Fish, but where others were either reticent or there was some hesitancy towards progress and change. My question is in regarding, and you may have mentioned this, so I'm just trying to figure out some of my notes here. And I want to know, given that a lot more people were spending a lot more time at home, how much of an increase in structural fires did we see in this last year from March to March versus in other years?
Madam Mayor, members of council, Councilmember Kasakian, it's a very good question. We did see an increase early on with residential fires throughout the state. Here in our city, we maintained pretty average numbers for our structure fire responses. We never saw a spike. The thought across the state was that more people are home, there's more activity during the day. Most of our structure fires, residential structure fires, are the large majority start in a kitchen or a garage. And the kitchen fires were definitely an increase. One area that we focused on early on as well was on our burn injuries because of kids being home, adults having to do remote work, maybe not paying attention to their children. So we had an effort with our Burn Foundation where we did some collective outreach on small things that homeowners can do to maintain awareness and keep burn injuries from our children, which I'm glad to say we did not have any in our city. So to answer your question, we did not see an increase. It was an average year as far as residential structure fires were concerned.
If we can get those figures perhaps for 3 years so we can maybe see an average for 3 years, that'd be great. I would credit a lot of it probably to the educational efforts that have happened, and it's remarkable that given all the sourdough bread baking that was going on social media that we didn't have any more home fires happening. The other question I have is one that is related to similar question that I asked our police department with COVID-19 and given the amount of outreach. And again, for those who are watching, and again to you and to your staff who are here, I thank you for going above and beyond, whether it's helping those who are homebound with their grocery shopping, whether it's providing vaccinations to individuals who are at home, or just really always figuring out a way to come up with yes versus why we can't do something. I thank you for that. And we spoke early on about which staff were going to be vaccinated. I was a little perplexed as to why the county and other health departments did not prioritize police given the amount of interactions, but I know that your staff was also interacting with individuals in our community and were oftentimes exposed. So I asked the police chief what that accounted for in terms of when someone comes off and they have to be segregated or home quarantined for 10 days. And you mentioned overtime, and it's clear. I understand why we have the overtime and the breakdown that we have, but do you have an idea as to how much of it was COVID related? And was it less because the fire department was in front of the line for vaccinations or less? That comparison would be helpful to me.
Yes, Madam Mayor, members of council, I do have several points that I'd like to make on your question. It's a great one. First, I would like to highlight that all of the efforts that we have done throughout this past year, vaccination efforts, as I mentioned, the senior delivery, the grocery delivery was done completely voluntarily. Not one time did we pay overtime for any of the additional things that we did. All of the work that we did was taken on by our employees on duty. We did not pay any. I never hired an additional engine or an additional truck company or additional personnel to do any of the vaccination efforts or any of those things that we did. That was all done on duty. As far as the vaccinated employees, 72% of our employees, and this may have increased over the last couple of weeks, but 72% of our employees, 192 employees, have been vaccinated throughout the organization. 30 of our members were tested positive for COVID-19 throughout the pandemic. I don't have the exact dollar amount of how much of our overtime. I'm looking over at our budget guru, Gore, to see if he has the exact amount of overtime that we spent behind coverage for those 30 employees that were off. I don't have that number right in front of me. But my feeling is between the 30 that were positive, the 192 who've been tested, we are in the 85 to 90% immunity within our organization.
That's great.
And I'm being handed a note that says $76,000 of our overtime was accounted for because of people being off on COVID.
$76,000, but that's still a relatively, I would assume, small amount in comparison and spread out over the course of a year, given what the other impact of overtimes is.
Absolutely. We were, as you might recall, we did a lot of things early on to keep our firefighters safe. We locked our stations down. We some things that were really non-traditional. We had them take their uniform shirts off and not wear them just because of the badge and the pins and additional things that could carry germs. We would not allow them to wear boots into the station. They were wearing tennis shoes and leaving the boots out in the station because that's what they were going into these homes with. We did a lot of disinfecting, thanks to our public work partners, our partners in public works. We were disinfecting our fire stations on the daily. So we did a lot of things to keep them safe, and 30 of our people becoming positive, that's across the entire organization, 271 employees, is a really, really low number compared to a lot. And thankfully, none of them had serious complications, and they're all back to work.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Welcome. Anyone else? Any phone calls?
Madam Mayor?
Yeah, Councilmember Najarian.
Yeah, just briefly, I'm very happy with the way the fire department stepped up, Chief. You said it all. I mean, the conditions were changing. No 911 call is the same. No year is the same. And you put your men and women in harm's way to keep us all safe. And I still assert that the high quality of our public safety departments are one of the, if not the most important thing that keeps Glendale a premier city in Southern California. So I truly appreciate everything that you've been doing. You also encouraged me with the statements about continuing to strive for diversity. And I thought I was going to zing you on that, but you covered it in your report. And I do want you to keep up the efforts to bring in more women and ethnic minorities into the fire department. And you said you're doing that and you're having some success with that. So just please keep that up. And good job. Very good job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Najarian. Gives me a good segue. Chief, you mentioned you have had an increase, 15% increase in women. How many women does that mean, and how many do we have currently on staff?
Give me just a minute. I have that information. Total women in the entire organization, we have 31. And that breaks down, we have 2 firefighters, we have 6 in fire prevention, we have 2 ambulance operators, 1 in our command staff, 3 administrative staff, and 17 in our Verdugo Fire Communications Center.
So we have 2 firefighters then, huh?
Correct. 2 firefighter paramedics.
Okay, all right. But I appreciate the elevation in the diversity. That's a really good thing. My question is, I want to have a question about the GOATS program, because I saw at the Ronald Reagan Museum they were using the goats for that. Where exactly are we going to be employing these goats? Above, like in the hillsides above Brand Park, or whereabouts?
I'm actually going to have Battalion Chief Fire Marshal Jeff Ragusa from our fire prevention section is here in the audience. I'll have him come up to the podium and provide a quick update on the 2 parks, the 2 areas. We're using it behind 2 parks as a pilot, and he could cover what those are.
And we've used goats before, though, right?
Many, many years ago, I was told we did, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. Madam Mayor, City Council. The GOAT project, this is our pilot project. We did use it a couple years ago at varying degrees. This year we scheduled for Verdugo Park and Montrose Park, a total of 20 acres. They will be housed at Verdugo Park. Our partners in Public Works have set up the area there so that they can be housed overnight. And then we will ship them, or the company will ship them, Sage Environmental, up to Montrose periodically in order to clear the brush area. Our goal is to get 100 feet from the structures, and it's a long-term solution in the sense that the goats are utilized to not only abate the brush on an annual basis, but they're also used to ideally limit the growth in the future, which we can't really do with mechanical. The rest of our abatement we do with the city is also environmentally friendly. We don't use equipment, we don't use herbicides, we generally use hand tools and manual labor. However, the growth generally comes back the next year. With this goat program, our goal is to slowly get away the noxious brush that causes hazards in those areas. Are there any questions at all? Thank you.
Thank you, Battalion Chief. Also, they were saying that on the news that they're great for fertilization as well. That's beside the point. And what was the date for the CERT program beginning? You mentioned, and I missed that date.
Madam Mayor, members of council, we are aiming for September for our first in-person CERT class.
September. Okay, thank you. Well, thank you for everything that your department does. You know that we totally appreciate you and respect all of you, and we thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Keith. Next, Mr. Galanian.
Yes, Madam Mayor, members of City Council, this concludes budget study number 6. Thank you for indulging us over the last 4 budget study sessions with a departmental presentation. I wanted to express my appreciation to all the department directors and their staff who, upon my request, quickly obliged and made changes to the presentations. This year's presentations, as you saw, were unique and different. Hopefully we don't have to go through another pandemic of the sort, and departments had to provide information on how they pivoted from a normal year to a pandemic-driven budget and operations. My hope and expectation is that during next year's budget presentations, more specifically when it comes to departmental presentations, we will have a greater focus on performance metrics, as well as a new set of goals and priorities set by council once our new strategic plan is adopted. With that, I just want to inform you that our next budget study session, number 7, and the last one, will be on Thursday, May 20th at 9 a.m., and we will cover the fiscal year 21-22 citywide budget summary, as well as all the follow-up items that council has requested. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Galanian. So we'll see everybody back here Thursday morning at 9 a.m. And with that, I will entertain a motion for adjournment.
I'll move to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
We are adjourned at 10:47 a.m. Thank you all. See you at 3.